Citizen celebrating 100 years of watchmaking with, of course, 100 watches. Special event here in New York City taking place. I was lucky enough to be invited to this event and I got to see all 100 of their historic watches. This is basically a museum that they have set up in a pop-up shop, and I got to bring a camera along, take some videos and photos of all the watches there. I have a few of those watches that I think are special that I want to talk about today. I have all the information about these watches as well, dates and things like that. And specifically, some of these watches are watches that I wish Citizen would consider reissuing because I think they are pretty damn awesome. Now, Citizen had 100 watches on display here, so this is just a little snippet of some of those watches. I'll put a link down in the description below. There's also a book coming out that was written by Jack Forrester, so if you're interested in this, definitely check out the links down in the description. So I'm going to start with what was my favorite watch from the entire show, and you're not going to be that surprised. It was a Worldtimer that I did not even know existed, that Citizen even made. It was from the 1970s, or is from the 1970s, 1976 to be exact. This is a very 70s style Worldtimer. You have a barrel case that's angular. This one did not come on a bracelet. However, I believe they did make a bracelet for this watch originally. This one was on a strap. It has a silver dial, a 24-hour track that's in blue and black, and then you have two crowns, one that controls the time, it's also a GMT, and one that controls the inner rotating bezel, which is the world time function on this watch. It comes in at a whopping 42 millimeters. It's actually a pretty large watch for a vintage Worldtimer, really any vintage watch from 1976. So this is a very large watch. It's kind of in the vein of a Speedmaster. You have a barrel case without any lugs, and you have a strap that fits into those lugs, or this lugless design. Really great looking watch, and I really do hope they reissue this watch because I definitely want to own one when they do. If they do this in an eco drive form, I think that would be really good, but it would be really great if they did this in an automatic with a GMT movement. I would be very excited about this watch, but of course I'm a huge fan of Worldtimer, so that kind of makes sense. The next watch that I think was extremely interesting, and a lot of people that were at this event were really hovering over this watch and were blown away that Citizen even made a watch like this. It was a triple calendar. However, it was a very traditional, or is a very traditional triple calendar. I think a lot of people want Citizen to reissue this watch. I believe it was a manual wind and it was a triple date. So you had a month, a day, and a radial date. So basically a central date. And then you had a small seconds down at the 6 o'clock. This really did look like a Patek Philippe. If you took off the name Citizen on the dial, Citizen Calendar or Calendar Citizen, whatever it said on there, and you put Patek Philippe, you wouldn't know the difference. It's really that elegant. A very beautiful watch from Citizen, something I did not expect to see at this event, and I think everyone there was blown away by this watch. This would be an incredible watch for them to come out with because I think it would be a very big seller for them. Again, another watch that I hope that they reissue. The next watch on this list is a very, very weird watch, and I actually really want one. They're really pretty rare. It was released in 2002 and it's called the Meme of Citizen. This is a little watch. It's basically a bracelet. It's probably originally a woman's watch. However, it has 5 faces and each one of those faces is a tiny, tiny quartz movement. I believe it's the world's smallest quartz movement, or at least at that time, it was the world's smallest quartz movement. It has a leather strap, so I believe that the portion that is a strap was actually leather, and then it has sort of almost looks like a stoplight, so each one of the little circles is a time zone. Basically, when you look at your watch, you have all 5 time zones for wherever you want to track on your wrist, and I would actually wear this watch on my right wrist as sort of a bracelet. I think it looks amazing. I think they should reissue this not only for men, but for ladies as well. I think men can wear it as a bracelet on their right wrist or left wrist, depending on where you actually wear your watch. I think this would look really very, very interesting and very cool. The next watch that I got to take a look at is not a watch that I think they should reissue because they currently make watches that have this functionality. However, this was the first ever multi-band radio controlled watch that Citizen ever made. And I believe it was the first ever multi-band radio controlled watch ever made by any brand. So what they did with this watch was actually put the antenna directly in the center of the dial so that when you looked at your watch, you were reminded that this was technology, something special, something different, something that was extremely accurate, and that it was actually radio controlled. So it was no mistaking it for anything else. And this was definitely not an automatic watch or a hand-wound watch. It was technology for your wrist. They still make watches like this. Obviously, they don't put the antenna in your face anymore. However, you do get a lot of radio-controlled and GPS-controlled watches from Citizen. They've always been at the front of technology, and this just reminds you how early they actually did this, because this came out in 1993. I didn't know this existed back then, and I was collecting watches even back then, and I did not know this even existed. And I think this is pretty damn cool. I think it's a really interesting looking watch. And if you look on places like eBay, these are going for a pretty penny. I don't think Citizen would ever reissue anything like this because it kind of doesn't make sense. It looks like old technology, and they currently have way better technology than this watch has because they've obviously made better iterations of it. But really just a very cool vintage retro tech watch that I think a lot of people out there would be very interested in owning just because it was a first. So in the display at Citizen at this 100th celebration, there was, of course, that calendar watch that I was talking about. However, right next to it, right to the left of that watch, was another very cool watch. It was an alarm watch that Citizen made, and this is basically in the same vein as Vulcain and all the other Swiss producers of the time. This looked exactly like those watches. I would have mistaken this for a Swiss watch if I didn't know any better. This was actually made in 1958, and I was very surprised that Citizen made an alarm watch. I really hope, again, that they reissue something like this, a mechanical alarm watch from a Japanese brand. Right now, there really isn't anything out there. Seiko did make a few. However, I think this one is way better looking. It almost looks like a JLC. I think this is one of the better looking mechanical alarm watches from that era, Swiss or Japanese. The next watch, if you actually go into my eBay and check my saved searches, you will find this watch on that saved search. There is a yellow version of it out there somewhere that I really, really want to own one day. It is called the Soundwich from Citizen. This is just basically a digital watch that is in a rectangle form. It gets, I believe, pretty good water resistance, like 300 meters of water resistance or something like that. But there's also an attachment that goes onto the side of the watch, and that is basically an AM, FM receiver, and you can listen to the radio with your watch. Now, they're not the only brand that's done this. There's been plenty of other brands who have done it. However, it's the design of this watch that I find most appealing. It's the shape of the case and, of course, the colors that they offered this in. This one that we're looking at here is in black. Like I said, they've made these in other colors as well. I think it's a really funky, a really weird 80s, 90s looking watch, and I really do want to own one. These are actually pretty expensive on the secondary market, and again, I wish that Citizen would reissue something like this, maybe make it with a, I don't know, an MP3 player, but those are all but obsolete now anyway, so the hopes of something like this being reissued are pretty much dashed, but I do have that eBay search, so one day maybe it'll hit and I'll be able to own one. So I keep on talking about watches that I wish Citizen would reissue. Well, this one is one that Citizen have reissued. It's the Professional Diver 1300 meters. Now, when they reissued it, it got 200 meters of water resistance or 300 meters of water resistance. However, there are a few different iterations of this watch that Citizen have made. It's a big tool watch, and it was really cool to see one of these in person. I've actually never seen one of the vintage versions from 1982 in person, and it gets a helium escape valve. It looks like just a big watch that's made for professionals. It reminds me of watches like Panerai, the Tuna, and all those other professional dive watches that were purpose built. And it just reminds you that Citizen have a very long history of diving, and they currently make watches that are in the same vein as this watch is back then today. And I really like to see that, and I really like to see this history. So wrapping up this video, I want to end with two watches that I also thought were pretty special. One was called the Glorious Citizen. This is in a higher end vein of what they were doing back then. This is a watch from 1972, and you can see from the case shape, the dial, the angles on this watch, this was meant for a higher end audience. And I think that they're doing things like this now with the Citizen and a few other watches that they're finally introducing here in the United States. And I hope they keep on going in that direction, offering you these beautiful watches like the Ciosa and of course the Forza that just recently came out, but also these higher end watches featuring eco drive movements, mechanical movements, things like that. Like this, I hope that they do things like this Glorious Citizen, maybe even revive the name Glorious Citizen or something similar to it. I think that would be really cool. And the last watch that I want to talk about that I found very interesting at this 100th anniversary celebration for Citizen was a Record Citizen. That's what it's called. It's a chronograph. It basically has a central counter. It came out in 1967, and again, one of those watches that I wish that they would reissue. This would be a little bit more of a higher end watch for them, and it looks like a higher end watch. I think this would be very, very cool if they actually considered doing something like this. Again, a lot of the watches that I spoke about in this video, I really wish that Citizen would consider reissuing. I've said that enough, I think, in this video, so I'll end it here. Anyway, guys, tell me what you think down in the comments below. Again, I'll put links to the book that they're coming out with. And of course, if there is a link to the watches that were actually displayed at this 100th anniversary event, I'll put a link to that down in the description below so you can check out some of these watches for yourself. Again, this is just a handful of the watches that were there. There was also a pocket watch, the new reissue pocket watch, and the original pocket watch that they actually made, one of their first watches or the first watch that they ever made. And then they have a reissue of that pocket watch that was mind-blowingly beautiful. I put that on my Instagram almost immediately. I thought it looked pretty damn cool and really, really well made. And the dial on this was pretty out of this world as well. So definitely check out those links. I'll put links down in the description. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. I'll catch you guys in the next video.